when Russia is specifically saying we want to conquer more territory and we plan to conquer it with force and brute force at that of killing more civilians, it is something that helps us out a lot to show just how evil this Russian Federation is when they're invading a country. So as unfortunate as the situation is, Russia showing their true colors, showing how evil they truly are, and showing their true intentions is something that helps us out a huge amount.
Today with us is Matthew Sampson, a former U.S. Marine Coast Guard sniper who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and later volunteered to fight for Ukraine as a part of International Legion. Matthew, welcome to our program.
It's very good to see you again, and thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here again.
Matthew, the last time we met, it was here in Kyiv in studio, and now you're back in the US at home and advocating for Ukraine. Can you tell us a bit more about your mission and what are you doing there these days?
Yes, absolutely. My mission is still continuing to share my passion of helping and serving others and educating the American voters and the American lawmakers here. I work as much as I can with the pro-Ukrainian community here locally in the Arizona area. I'm just outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And just recently, I was able to help load over 270 very large boxes of gear and equipment with the local pro-Ukrainian community. That was then shipped over to Ukraine to help out the frontline fighters that are defending Ukraine from the Russian aggressor. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm very happy that I'm able to help here, as well as all the work that I was able to do physically in Ukraine and the work that I'm able to do in Washington as well.
You've met with senators and members of Congress. What's the mood there? Do you feel that there is still a strong political will to support Ukraine?
Absolutely. I was there just last month. I flew straight from Europe into Washington, D.C. last month. And it was a fantastic experience once again. I was there one of over 750 people representing all 50 states and one of our territories of Puerto Rico. And I was the only person there that had significant combat time in Ukraine of over 600 days doing combat operations as an American. However, we all worked together to advocate for Ukraine. We had over 452 meetings with the offices of the House of Representatives and the Senate, which comprised of 535 offices. And even during our government shutdown, that is still an unprecedented number of meetings to have. Like I said, it was 452 meetings. That's huge. And all the meetings were very positive across the board. It didn't matter if it was Democrat or Republican, independent. It didn't matter who we were talking to. Everyone was very supportive of all the very specific advocacy issues that we were talking about. One of them specifically was about returning the Ukrainian children. We know that there's a list of almost 20,000 Ukrainian names that have been children kidnapped by the Russian Federation and taken into Russian custody illegally. And this was one of the main points that we're advocating for, along with some other things, sanctions and some other things that I can go into more detail about. But this is something that everyone on both sides of the aisle here politically were able to fully agree with and fully support. Also, sanctions that have recently been passed by the United States have negatively affected Russia, and it's helping the frontline operations on the Ukrainian side already substantially.
Actually, it's good to hear these words here in Kyiv these days. And when you speak to Congress and the American public, how do you convey your frontline experience to make the case for Ukraine? Maybe you can share some notes and some messages with our audience.
I'm able to share some specific experiences. One, about the children. It's unfortunate, but there's been times that we've identified Ukrainian children that have been killed at the front lines that are wearing Russian uniforms. We know that if they're Ukrainian children that are teenagers, especially older teenagers, that sometimes the Russians put them in Russian uniforms, give them a weapon, and send them out to the front lines to fight for the Russian side. And either they get killed by the Russians or, unfortunately, they get killed by our side of the fighting. And that is weaponizing children, something that is horrible, something that should never be allowed. And everyone on the American side fully supports that should never be allowed. It should never happen. So that is something that I am happy and thankful that we have so much support in Congress, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, that this is not something that should be allowed whatsoever. So that is one of the experience I'm able to share about. I'm also able to share how the sanctions are negatively affecting the frontline operations for Russia, and that Russia is not able to be very effective at the front lines with fuel shortages and equipment shortages because of their lack of funding due to the sanctions that are being imposed by Russia. And that is something that is encouraging to a lot of the members of the House of Representatives and the Senate, along with those that are also advocating to see that our voices are being heard, our voices matter, and that these policies are actually being very effective.
Yes, indeed. I really want to touch on the situation on the ground and hear your perspective. We know that heavy fightings are ongoing in Pokrovsk, and Russian forces are also pushing in Zaporizhzhia direction, actually where you used to serve. How do you see the situation right now?
Yes, correct. I was in Zaporizhzhia at the front lines just last month. I was able to get a little bit of footage there, video, and some photographs there. I was able to talk to some battlefield commanders that I fought with for years there. And it was a good experience for me to just get good firsthand information there. And I know that Russia has been very open and deliberate that they plan to take these areas. For us, I think that's helpful for us. And it helps us better defend these areas and send more resources there when Russia is openly saying that these are our goals. I know that looking at those that are advocating and also the congressional offices I talk to, they are very excited that there's more and more resources going to the front lines, not just from the United States, but from the European Union as well, weapons, ammunition, and other supplies to defend these areas. So it's something that I know that the fighting in these areas, it can be very intense right now. However, there's a lot of support going to those areas from the European Union and the United States, not just through these sanctions, but also through equipment.
Kyrylo Budanov recently said that Russia's goal of taking the entire Donetsk region by spring 2026 is unrealistic. Based on what you've seen on the front, do you agree?
Absolutely. And again, Russia being so vocal about saying something like this, it helps Ukraine a lot. It really does. And it helps the West a lot that for so many Western voters that believe some of the propaganda and disinformation that comes out of the Kremlin, that Russia is a peaceful nation, stuff like this helps out a lot, that we are able to see when Russia is specifically saying we want to conquer more territory and we plan to conquer it with force and brute force at that of killing more civilians. It is something that helps us out a lot to show just how evil this Russian Federation is when they're invading a country. So as unfortunate as the situation is, Russia showing their true colors, showing how evil they truly are, and showing their true intentions is something that helps us out a huge amount. And the more I interact with American voters and American lawmakers, they are able to see just how evil this whole situation is. And this is really just a fight of good versus evil more than anything else. And that is something that is very positive and helpful for the entire Western side of this war and fighting for Ukrainian independence and sovereignty and the protection of the European continent and nations from the Russian aggressor.
Are there any new tactics or organizational patterns in Russian army that stand out to you these days?
Just a lot of drones. Part of what I was able to talk with some of these offices in Washington about is how we might be able to support the Ukrainian front lines with more ground use drones. Drones that are on the ground, they're much quieter. Sometimes they can be hit multiple times and still work. And that is something that I was trying to help out with, of just sharing some experience from the battlefield commanders that I recently talked to in person there at the front lines. That due to Russia using so many of the aerial drones, and even just last month when I was at the front, we had casualties at the front that were not able to be recovered very quickly because of how many Russian drones were in the air, being very effective, unfortunately. That more ground-based drones on the Ukrainian side would be very effective to try to bring back some of these casualties that are stuck at the front lines. So the short answer is just a lot of the aerial-based drones. And I think Russia is making a mistake by relying on this too much. And it allows the Ukrainian side to exploit this weakness.
And besides the drones, from your perspective, what kind of challenges does the Ukrainian army face the most right now? I'm talking about technical issues, resource shortages, or even organizational problems, because you've seen it in your own eyes.
I would say one of them might be fuel. Both sides are having trouble a little bit with fuel, getting fuel to the front lines, primarily diesel fuel. And that's because both sides have struck fuel depots deep within their respective territories. So that is something that was confirmed to me while I was there recently. Both sides are having this same difficulty. And they're hoping to get more support from the West with fuel supplies. So that way they can rectify this issue and continue to push as we get further into winter and get more into offensive operations before the spring comes, if they can get a little more assistance with fuel so they can push forward and take advantage of the fuel shortages that Russia is currently facing now as well, especially with these sanctions, that Russia's not able to get the funds that they need to repair some of their fuel depots and also purchase fuel from other neighboring countries that are helping them, places like China, for example.
Let's go back to your own plans. Do you plan to return to Ukraine? And if so, what will you focus on during your next trip?
Absolutely. I plan to return sometime next year. I hope to spend a little bit more time there. However, it's something that it's usually depending on funds that are available. Everything I do now is primarily based off of donations. It's stuff that for anyone that wants to get involved, they could easily find me and follow me. If you Google me, Matthew Sampson Ukraine, it's the best way to get in contact with me and follow what I'm doing. Matthew Sampson Ukraine on the entire Google page. The first thing that pops up is usually my website. I have a fundraiser page there that can help me travel and gives me more opportunities to spend time in Ukraine, spend more time at the front lines, spend more time talking to Congress, going to Washington, all different things like this. But so far, I have found that it has been very effective to spend time in Ukraine prior to going to Washington and talk to Congress for the Ukraine Action Summits. And these summits happen twice a year. The next one is probably going to be scheduled around April timeframe, somewhere around there. And I'd like to spend more time in Ukraine. However, just like anything else with this war, nothing is free. A lot of it's very expensive. And even this last trip was very expensive. And I was able to find only a few donors that were able to help out with just a small portion of the travel costs and all the other various expenses to make this happen. So the more support I'm able to get, the more often I can go to Ukraine and be the American voice to really help solidify the support of this war of freedom and sovereignty against the evil and tyranny of the Russian Federation. I am very excited to return as soon as I possibly can to continue being this voice for freedom as we continue to fight.
How would you assess NATO's readiness in case Russia escalates its threats in Europe?
I believe every day NATO is becoming more and more ready. I know that the American administration for many years now has been pushing the European NATO to increase their defense spending. in order to specifically avoid the issue that we're facing right now of an aggressor pushing into NATO areas. We know that Putin has specifically been pushing drones into NATO. Putin has sent numerous drones into Poland. Putin has said he wants to invade Poland. So Putin has said that he wants to invade NATO already. He has said this numerous times. So with the American administrations over the last few years pushing the European NATOs to increase their defense spending, they have been doing that slowly. That's a huge positive. And we know from the front lines that more and more support is coming from the European Union countries, which is a huge positive both for the NATO countries and for the front lines. So that's great news all the way around. And it is showing Russia that this is a united front, that Russia is not only fighting Ukraine, Russia is fighting NATO. And for those that are intelligent enough over there to understand this, they're able to see that they're fighting really a world war already, and not just one country that they feel that they can just overpower with brute force. And that is something that is a huge benefit to Ukraine, especially, but also to all the Western nations that want to really force Russia to just go back home and stay on their own soil.
Based on your experience on the front line, are there any mistakes or misunderstanding in how the West supports Ukraine that you think should be addressed?
I would say one of the biggest ones is training. I am working with one of my senators now to see if we're able to create an additional and new Ukrainian-American joint training program to help out with just basic training. We do this very well in the West, and especially in the United States. As a U.S. Marine, we have a very unique training regimen with our Marine Corps boot camp, and we're in talks of seeing if we can adapt something like that for the Ukrainian recruits. And I'm hoping that something like this can come together and be an asset for not just Ukraine, but to really strengthen the overall military there, the cultural and the mindset there. And this will be a huge strengthening aspect for all of the European Union, with Ukraine really being the first line of defense against the Russian aggressor. And this is something that part of our advocacy is full security guarantees for Ukrainian sovereignty. In the past, we had the Budapest Memorandum, which was really a piece of paper that numerous countries signed, that if Ukraine gives up their nuclear weapons, that Ukraine won't be invaded by Russia. We know that that piece of paper did not provide security guarantees to Ukraine, unfortunately. However, if we provide Ukraine with the tools and resources to have a strong and robust military, then that is really the best way to have full sovereignty and security guarantees for the Ukrainian nation and the Ukrainian people. And having great, fantastic training, I believe, is the best stepping stone and foundation for that. So that is something that I'm in the works on. I'm hoping that it's something that the two governments, the Ukrainian government and American governments, can work together to really make happen and to slowly transform for the better the Ukrainian military, especially for the recruits. And I think that would also increase the amount of volunteer recruits in the Ukrainian military. And I'm very excited to get all that together, and I hope it works out very well.
And finally, there has been a lot of discussions these days about potential peace plans coming from the US. From your perspective, under what circumstances could Russia realistically consider ending the war? Do you see any real willingness from Russian side, given the ongoing attacks on civilians in Ukraine?
I'd say from the Russian side that they're in a very challenging position, and I believe the only way that they will really agree to a peace plan is with extreme force from the West. Stuff like these additional sanctions that were imposed on them last month, the sanctions that we've been pushing at Congress to increase pressure on the Russian Federation is really the only way to force Russia to the negotiating table. To bring up the kids again, it's one of the issues that we brought up, that there be no peace plan agreement until the children are returned home, that the children should not be part of the negotiation whatsoever. You cannot weaponize children. So the Ukrainian children, all of them need to be returned home before there's any peace agreements. We do know already that the sanctions that came out of the White House last month are negatively affecting Russia in a huge, substantial way. That's a huge positive for us, and it's forcing Russia a little bit closer to the negotiating table. We have advocated for additional sanctions to come out of Congress that will also force Russia one step closer again to the negotiating table. And I believe that that's really going to be the only way that we can get Russia to talk about peace anytime in the near future is if they really have no other financial options to continue to keep their economy from completely collapsing and to avoid what we saw in 1991 of their country collapsing. So in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Right now we have the Russian Federation. And if Russia does not want that to collapse and fall apart completely, then I believe that their only other option is to discuss an actual peace plan. And I think they will only do that once they feel more pressure from the West with these various sanctions.
Matthew, thank you very much for your time, for being with us today, and for your support to Ukraine.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate these interactions and discussions. And I'm so happy that we're able to work together from different parts of the world, different hemispheres, to really continue this fight for freedom for not just the European continent, but for our respective homeland. So thank you very much for everything.